Smoke coiled over the ruined battlefield like living fingers. Twisted wreckage lay scattered across the blasted ground. The skeletons of mechs and charge troop carriers, still hissing, where molten metal cooled. Trees stood shattered and blackened, their broken trunks clawing at the gray sky. In the center of it all, surrounded by death, sat a lone figure, laughing. The sound was jarring in the silence, high and wild, yet unmistakably human. Galactic soldiers, tall and glistening in armor that shimmered with refractive energy fields, moved cautiously through the wreckage. Their weapons, sleek and humming, tracked every shadow. They had expected resistance, not this massacre. Not one of their tactical models accounted for a single human remaining where an entire battalion had fallen. Commander Vectal tightened his grip on his plasma carbine, his sensory nodes twitching uneasily beneath his helmet. The human was hunched atop a burnt-out walker, crimson-streaked and mud-caked, clutching his side but grinning through blood-smeared teeth. His eyes, bright and clear despite the madness of the scene, tracked the approaching soldiers with unnerving calm. "Identify yourself," Vectal barked, voice amplified by his armor speakers. Around him, his squad fanned out, weapons ready. "Lay down your arms and submit. Resistance is futile." The human tilted his head, as if trying to parse the words, then laughed harder. It was not the broken sound of defeat, but something sharper, almost mocking. The sound prickled at the edges of Vectal's nerves. He had faced human insurgents before. None had ever reacted this way. "Commander," said Sub-Officer Kren, his tone clipped, "this one could be psychologically broken. Standard doctrine advises sedation and immediate extraction for study." Vectal nodded. "Approach with caution. Sedate him." Two soldiers moved forward, steps heavy and deliberate. The human watched, expression unreadable. As the aliens neared, he shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, but Vectal's eyes caught it. The casual flex of muscles under torn fabric, the subtle pivot of his boots grinding against debris. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. The moment one soldier reached for him, the human sprang. With explosive speed, he twisted off a shard of jagged metal from the walker wreckage and drove it through the soldier's throat joint before the alien could even react. Vectal shouted a warning, but the second soldier was already down, fell by a bone-snapping blow to the knee, followed by a savage slash across his exposed jaw. Plasma fire lit the battlefield as the squad unleashed a barrage, but the human moved like water, ducking behind the remains of a scorched crawler. The bolts vaporized twisted metal, sending sparks raining over the mud, but the human was already gone, slipping deeper into the wreckage like a wraith. Vectal cursed, switching to thermal scans. "Track him. He is wounded. He cannot have gone far." Sensors flared, but the readings were chaotic. The area was saturated with heat signatures from burning debris and lingering plasma discharges. The human could be anywhere. He was alone, Kren said, disbelief threading his voice. "How did he—" "He's not broken," Vectal growled. "He's hunting." A low, mechanical whine split the air as aerial drones swept overhead, their optical field searching. For a moment, there was nothing but the crackle of fire and the faint groan of collapsing structures. Then, on the western flank, a drone exploded mid-flight, spiraling into the ground in a shower of burning metal. "He's disabling our recon," Kren reported grimly. "Deliberate strikes." A ripple of unease passed through the soldiers. It was unthinkable. Humans were supposed to be primitive. Resourceful, yes, but this level of aggression, planning, and precision from a single wounded operative was beyond any of their briefings. "Adjust mission parameters," Vectal ordered. "Capture is no longer the priority. Terminate on sight." Before the order could ripple through the comms, a shriek rang out from the east perimeter. One of the soldiers staggered into view, clutching at a gaping wound across his midsection. He collapsed without a sound, his body twitching in the mud. Vectal turned in a slow circle, scanning the ruins. The laughter had stopped. That was somehow worse. The human had become the jungle itself, unseen, unheard, and lethal. The soldiers, for all their advanced armor and superior weapons, were suddenly prey. A cold, clinical voice crackled through Vectal's comms from the command carrier in orbit. Status report, Commander. He hesitated, swallowing pride. Encounter with hostile human operative. Minimal forces remain. Requesting immediate reinforcements and orbital surveillance. There was a pause. Then, chillingly, negative. Reinforcements are allocated elsewhere. You are ordered to suppress the hostile with current assets. The transmission ended before Vectal could respond. He lowered his weapon slightly, a grim realization settling over him. They had underestimated this world and its defenders. This human wasn't fighting for victory. He was fighting for annihilation. In the distance, barely audible over the crackling fires, a soft sound echoed through the ruins, a chuckle, low and menacing. The soldiers tightened their formation instinctively, scanning the darkness with wide, fearful eyes. Commander Vectal's instincts screamed retreat, but pride chained his feet to the ground. They would find the human. They would break him, or they would die trying. Mud sucked at their boots as the Galactic soldiers advanced through the debris field. Every broken mech, every overturned troop carrier, felt like an ambush waiting to happen. The deathly quiet stretch taut across the battlefield, broken only by the occasional groan of twisted metal cooling under the overcast sky. Vectal kept his weapon raised, visor optics constantly cycling through spectrums. The human was somewhere ahead, bleeding, wounded, yet lethal. A ghost among ruins. Logic dictated that he should have fled, sought shelter. Instead, he had stayed, turned the battlefield into his hunting ground. Kryn kept pace beside him, scanning corners and shadows with jerky, uncertain movements. His earlier confidence had eroded, replaced by the grim realization that their enemy was not fighting for survival. He was fighting to annihilate them one by one. Another soldier dropped back to guard their rear. Moments later, his helmet feed blinked out. No shot, no warning, just silence. A soft gasp carried over the comms before it cut off. Hold formation. Vectal snapped, masking his own fear with the clipped tone of authority. Close ranks. He's isolating and eliminating the stragglers. The soldiers obeyed, but every step felt heavier, like the weight of the dead dragged at their legs. Each ruin they passed seemed to whisper threats. The human could be anywhere, waiting with makeshift blades or salvage weapons. A faint buzz of static in Vectal's ear warned of another feed going dark. He swiveled toward the source, only to find a collapsed wall where one of his men should have been. Blood streaked the broken concrete. No body. The human was dismantling them methodically. Kryn exhaled shakily. Commander, permission to call for extraction. There will be no extraction, Vectal growled. Orders are clear. We end him here. But at what cost? Kryn hissed, glancing nervously into the misted horizon. This operative isn't following any doctrine. He's improvising. We're fighting blind against a predator that knows every scrap of this battlefield. Vectal didn't respond. He knew Kryn was right. But retreat without authorization meant dishonor, demotion, perhaps execution under High Command's doctrines. They had promised an easy conquest, a show of strength for the newer recruits. Instead, they had found hell. A distant thud snapped them alert. Vectal raised a hand, motioning toward the noise. Together, they moved cautiously, weaving through the burnt-out husks of war machines. The air grew thicker, heavy with the stench of burning polymers and blood. They found the source, a cargo crate, split open, its contents spilled into the mud. Medical supplies, food rations, ammunition, and something else, a trail of footprints, half filled with rainwater and mud, led away into the ruins. They were deliberate. A message. He's baiting us, Kren said, voice low. Vectal's jaw tightened. Then we spring the trap. They followed the trail in tight formation. Every nerve in Vectal's body screamed protest, but he shoved it down. Discipline was survival. The footprints led to a collapsed structure, a once grand communications tower, now reduced to a jagged skeleton. Its bent girders formed dark tunnels and crevices, perfect for an ambush. Every inch of Vectal's training screamed at him to turn back, but pride drove him forward. The squad moved inside. Darkness swallowed them almost instantly, the tower's broken frame blocking what little light filtered through the clouds. Flashlights flickered on, cutting narrow beams through the gloom. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the first soldier screamed. A shadow detached from the ceiling, dropping onto him with brutal force. A knife, salvaged from some broken blade, punched into the soldier's throat armor with terrifying precision. Blood sprayed the walls. The squad reacted too slowly. Plasma bolts filled the air, but the human was already moving, a blur in the darkness. Another soldier fell, weapon torn from his hands, throat crushed under a savage boot. Vectal fired blindly, desperation clawing at his mind. A glimpse of movement, a flash of a bloodied face, a hand smeared with soot, and then it was gone. Fall back, Vectal roared. The survivors scrambled out of the tower, dragging wounded and firing into the shadows. Vectal stumbled into the open air, gasping, scanning the ruins for any sign of pursuit. The human didn't follow. He didn't need to. The message was clear. I can kill you whenever I choose. Kren collapsed beside Vectal, panting, his armor gouged and smeared with blood that wasn't his own. We can't fight him like this. He's not just some soldier. He's something else. Vectal didn't answer. His mind raced, cataloging options, tactics. None seemed adequate. The human was using the terrain, the wreckage, even their fear against them. He understood them better than they understood him. Commander, one of the surviving soldiers said shakily, "What are your orders?" Vectal turned slowly, surveying his diminished squad. They were ragged, wounded, terrified, and it wasn't even dawn yet. He opened his mouth to respond. Then the ground beneath their feet shook with a low, resonant boom. From the western ridge, fires erupted. The human had rigged explosives across the battlefield. Booby traps, triggers hidden among debris, tied to pressure plates and collapsed structures. Their retreat had been anticipated and weaponized. Smoke poured into the ruins. Vectal coughed, blinking through stinging tears. Through the haze, he thought he saw a figure standing atop a broken tank turret, silhouetted against the burning sky. The human. No weapon, no armor, just a bloodied figure, standing with arms loose at his sides, head cocked as if listening to something only he could hear. Then, impossibly, he laughed. The sound carried over the chaos, over the screams and the fire. Not deranged, not desperate, pure, defiant joy. The laughter of someone who had already won. Vectal's stomach twisted. This wasn't war. This was something older, something primal, a lesson they had forgotten in their arrogance. The human vanished into the smoke once more. As the squad regrouped, battered and broken, Vectal realized the truth that chilled him deeper than the freezing rain beginning to fall. They hadn't come here to conquer a primitive world. They had wandered into a nightmare they could not wake from. Smoke drifted like living things across the ruined battlefield as Vectal knelt behind the twisted carcass of an armored personnel carrier. His chest heaved with the effort of keeping still, his armor plates scorched and dented. Rain mixed with the soot on his visor, blurring the world into shifting shadows. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to flee, but fear anchored him in place. Beside him, Kren was barely conscious, blood trickling from a split beneath his helmet. Of the original squad, only 3 remained, each clinging to cover, weapons loose in trembling hands. The human had not pursued them after the last trap. He didn't have to. The battlefield itself had become his ally, each broken ridge and burned-out shell another extension of his will. Vectal adjusted his grip on his rifle, peering into the murk. Somewhere out there, their enemy was waiting, watching, planning his next move. Every second dragged like an eternity, each heartbeat hammering against Vectal's ribs. A faint movement caught his eye, a flutter at the edge of vision, too deliberate to be wind. He raised his weapon, tracking it, pulse thundering. A metal canister rolled from the wreckage, bouncing once before settling in the mud. "Grenade! Scatter!" Vectal bellowed. The squad reacted instantly, adrenaline slicing through exhaustion. They dove for cover as the canister hissed. Not an explosive, but smoke. Dense, choking clouds swallowed them, severing lines of sight. Vectal barely had time to process before the human was among them. A shadow moved through the smoke, silent and sure. A soldier cried out, cut off mid-scream. Plasma bolts tore blindly into the haze, but found nothing. Vectal dropped to one knee, trying to make himself a smaller target. His optics struggled to cut through the interference. Only the faintest motion warned him, an outline slipping through the fog. He fired. The figure jerked sideways, a grunt of pain lost beneath the crackle of rain and static. Blood spattered across Vectal's armor, but the human kept coming, relentless, a force of nature made flesh. A blade gleamed briefly, then punched into another soldier's side with brutal efficiency. Vectal glimpsed Kren trying to rise, swinging his weapon wildly, before another flash of movement drove him back to the ground. They were being dismantled piece by piece, hunted in their own perimeter. Vectal's training surged to the forefront. He abandoned his position, rolling behind a collapsed turret mount. His fingers found the emergency beacon on his belt. He thumbed it, sending a distressed pulse skyward, a useless gesture. Reinforcements would not come in time. He was on his own. A figure loomed through the smoke, and Vectal fired again, more out of desperation than skill. The human staggered, a fresh line of blood marking his side. But he kept moving, eyes alight with grim fury, a twisted smile still playing on his lips. Vectal recognized the truth in that moment. This wasn't battle to the human. It was something purer. Revenge. Punishment. A predator teaching arrogant invaders the cost of trespass. The human lunged. Vectal blocked the first blow with the barrel of his rifle, wrenching it aside. He countered with a savage punch, catching the human across the jaw. The man stumbled, but recovered instantly, lashing out with the hilt of his blade. Pain blossomed across Vectal's ribs as the weapon connected. He grunted, staggered, barely deflecting the next strike. The human fought without hesitation, every move precise and economical, turning Vectal's greater size and strength against him. They circled, 2 dying stars caught in each other's gravity. Vectal's rifle clattered uselessly to the ground as he drew his sidearm. He fired at point-blank range, but the human twisted aside, the shot grazing his shoulder. With a guttural snarl, the human tackled him. They crashed into the mud, grappling for control. Vectal felt the blade pressing toward his throat, straining against his armor seams. He twisted violently, throwing the human off balance, but the man adapted instantly, wrenching Vectal's wrist and sending the pistol skidding away. The human's face was inches from his own now, eyes burning, mouth set in a grim line. Up close, Vectal could see the blood matting the man's beard, the bruises blooming along his cheekbone. He was wounded, battered. Yet in those eyes, there was no fear, only relentless, implacable determination. Desperation lent Vectal strength. He slammed his forehead into the human's faceplate, dazing him for half a second. It was enough. Vectal shoved him off, scrambling to his feet, snatching a jagged piece of wreckage as a makeshift weapon. The human rose slower, favoring his wounded side, but still grinning through cracked lips. "You don't get it," he rasped in thick, accented Galactic. "You never did." Vectal charged. The human sidestepped, impossibly fast, driving his elbow into Vectal's temple. Stars burst behind Vectal's eyes. His makeshift blade fell from numbed fingers. The human didn't finish him. Instead, he turned, limping toward the wreckage where Kren lay. "No," Vectal gasped, dragging himself forward. He wasn't fast enough. The human knelt beside Kren, checking his pulse with surprising gentleness. He seemed to weigh something in that moment, some private calculus. Then, wordlessly, he stood and melted back into the smoke, vanishing once more. Vectal collapsed into the mud, gasping for air that tasted of ash and failure. The battlefield was silent again, except for the distant crackle of flames and the steady patter of rain. Above them, the first light of dawn bled across the horizon. They had survived the night, but they had lost everything that mattered. In the distance, carried on the wind, came a soft, unmistakable sound. Laughter, not cruel, not mocking, just human. The sound of someone who had fought his war and won, on his own terms. Vectal closed his eyes, the realization sinking in like a blade between his ribs. This planet did not belong to them. It never had. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the battlefield was no less oppressive. The wreckage of alien mechs, smoldering husks of their pride, lay scattered like forgotten toys. The stench of blood and burning fuel hung thick in the air. It was a silence that stretched out, pregnant with the knowledge of defeat. The sun, a dim orange orb, cast its light weakly over the ruin, offering no warmth. Vectal was the last of his command alive. The others had fallen, their bodies littered across the jagged landscape, their lives snuffed out by a force they could never have anticipated. He could still feel the imprints of the battle in his body, the bruises and cuts a grim reminder of the fight that had ravaged him. His armor was pocked and scorched, his visor cracked, but the worst damage was to his pride, and that, he knew, might never heal. A hiss of static crackled in his helmet. A voice filtered through the comms, a distant, unfamiliar one. "Vectal, report." The cold, detached tone stung. It wasn't the voice of a leader, but a bureaucrat. Someone back at headquarters who had no idea what had transpired here. Someone who had never seen the nightmare he had just survived. Vectal stared out over the battlefield, his eyes fixed on the shattered remains of the humans' traps, the remnants of soldiers who had fought and died in vain. He was no longer sure how much time had passed since the last human attack, since the laughter that had chilled him to his core. "Commander Vectal," the voice repeated, more insistent now. "Report. Status of the mission." Vectal's fingers tightened around the ruined comm device. He clenched his jaw, swallowed the bitter taste in his mouth. "Mission failed," he said, his voice hoarse. "The human operative has evaded capture and inflicted catastrophic losses. The majority of my squad is dead. The battlefield is lost." There was a brief silence, as if the voice on the other end couldn't process the magnitude of his words. Then, finally, it spoke again. "Understood. Return to base. Immediate reinforcements will be dispatched. Continue to engage the human. His capture is a priority." Vectal laughed, bitter and hollow. "There will be no capture. He has won. We're the prey now." The comms went silent, and Vectal disconnected. There was nothing more to be said. No more orders to follow. The cold, harsh reality settled in. The invasion had failed. Not because they had been outnumbered. Not because they had lacked superior technology. But because they had underestimated the very thing that made humanity dangerous. Its resilience. A noise broke the stillness. A soft crunch, like footsteps on debris. Vectal's heart skipped a beat. He turned sharply, rifle raised, but there was no immediate threat. His eyes narrowed. There, standing at the edge of the battlefield, was the human, bloodied, bruised, but alive. He leaned casually on his rifle, looking at Vectal with an almost bored expression. It was as though he had just finished some menial task, and now had time to admire the destruction. Vectal's mind raced. How? Why hadn't the human taken this moment to finish him, to deal the final blow? The human stepped forward, not with the arrogance of a conqueror, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had done exactly what he intended. He didn't need to fight anymore. He had already won. "You're still here," the human said, his voice hoarse, but oddly amused. "I thought you'd have run by now." Vectal narrowed his eyes. His pulse quickened. "Why haven't you killed me?" he asked, his voice raw with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. The human chuckled, the sound low and rich. "I don't kill out of pity," he said. "You've learned your lesson, Commander. I'm done here." Vectal's grip on his rifle tightened. "You're a monster," he spat, though even as he said it, he realized that the word had lost all its meaning. The human had been nothing like the monsters he had imagined. The human shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a man trying to protect his home. Your people had no right to come here. Then why leave me alive?" Vectal demanded, his voice cracking. The human tilted his head, as if considering the question. "Because I don't need to kill you. You'll remember this, won't you? You'll go back, tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them about the human who defeated your army with nothing but his will and his fury. And when they come back, there won't be enough of you left to even call it an invasion." Vectal felt something dark stir within him, a cold realization sweeping over him. The human was right. The war was lost, but it wasn't the end. It couldn't be. The humiliation, the defeat, it would haunt his species for generations. The human raised his rifle, slinging it over his shoulder with effortless ease. Then, before Vectal could even register the motion, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the jungle as if he had never been there at all. Vectal remained on his knees, staring into the mist. His breath came in ragged gasps, the sound almost drowned out by the wind. The enemy was gone, but the war was far from over. Behind him, the transmission came again, insistent and robotic, its words unintelligible in the face of the enormity of his failure. And Vectal realized for the first time in his life that the most terrifying part of all of this wasn't the violence or the bloodshed. It was that the humans were right. Their species was simply too adaptable, too relentless. And no matter how many battles they won, they would never, ever understand the cost of underestimating humanity.